Good morning, you handsome lot, and it is Friday yet again. Where do the weeks go? And now I know I've had a broken week where I went to the show down in Sandown Park, but however, we have got a flat-out wet belt Friday, and it's a 2015 Ford Focus, and this vehicle has covered 100,000 miles. Now I told you I would never really do a video again, but I thought with it being 100,000 miles, I'm going to bring you along for the ride just to see the condition of the belt and what the oil pickup is like. Should we get involved? The thing that we are going to be doing is disconnecting the battery just by there with that 13mm, undo the cap on the header tank. So we're going to take the vehicle up and we're going to drain all the coolant out of it. Right, well I've got this vehicle up in the air now and we're draining our coolant out into our lovely little receptacle. And I have put a little bit of pipe on the radiator there so it's not getting everywhere because we don't like mess, do we? We do not like mess. Now something is telling me that this car's been a little bit played with because we've got a lot of sealant around the sump there. We've got bolts missing out of the sump there. Something telling me that this has been played with. Now I don't think the belt's been done because that is an old crank pulley. And there's also bolts missing out of that up there. Can you see? There's a bolt missing there. It's just something's not adding up. What's going on? What's going on? Right, with all that coolant dropped out, I've now got the oil draining into my receptacle. Now, the hardest part of doing this job is getting the cat off. Because them two bolts at the back there, they can be a bit of a nightmare, especially if they're corroded. But I've had to get the heat inductor on it and give them a little bit of heat through it, and they did come off relatively easy. Now, to get the cat off, it is easier if you remove the air conditioning alternator pump. It's going to identify as an alternator pump today, that is. Right. Get the... yeah, that's one of them. We need to remove the tensioner, the idler, and then we can drop the car down and see if all the 3 bolts or 4 bolts come undone. With all them ancillaries now off the vehicle, your air conditioning pump, I've taken the air conditioning pump off because I don't know whether this vehicle's got a leak or it's been off previously and I haven't regassed it, but there was no gas in it. I thought, well, rather than have it dangling my way, just take it off. Take it off. But the more I'm undressing this engine, it's poor workmanship, this. Poor workmanship. Right. I don't know what's going on with the wiring loom here. It looks all bodged, taped up. There's bolts missing out of the cat there. There's silicone, and I mean silicone on the water pump. Who's done that? It doesn't need silicone. It doesn't need any sealant. It's got a gasket. And that does my head in. It looks awful. It looks absolutely awful. Right, well, I've got to go ahead now and just remove the starter motor. I have attached the engine support, which is on the gearbox, and that's going to help me so much. Again, making the job a little bit more easier for me. There's 2 bolts behind here on the heat shield, which haven't been put back in. And all these 4 bolts on the flange, on the turbo flange, they were very loose. And they've come in very, very easy. Now, it does look as if it's had a new turbo. And again, there's lots of silicone everywhere. I don't know, we need to plod on. Well, it is getting worse, I'm not going to lie. The intake pipe that goes to the turbo, around the back here there is a little vacuum line which goes there. That was off. How this car hasn't had an engine management light with that drawing in on measure there, I do not know. But we've got to still do the job. We've got to do it. We've got to correct all this. Put bolts where they've been left out. It's making the job harder. But we'll get there. Thought I'd try and get a little bit ahead of myself. You know them 2 bolts that I need for the gearbox, which I showed you earlier. I thought I'll give Ford a ring, see if I can get them for today, but I can't. It's going to be Monday. It's now Friday, which isn't good enough. But again, we're going to have to wait. Because you know by now, we like things right. If it's not right, it's not done properly. And of course, I also need a header tank because it's got a great big crack down the bottom of it. I can see this car having a little bit of a shopping list. Someone else's poor workmanship Probably going to put a couple £100 on top of this bill. But it is what it is at the end of the day. It's got to be done right, isn't it? I'm going to go ahead now and get all this rock cover off, coil packs out, fuel rail off. I'm going to chuck it into a little bit of a time lapse. And there we have it with a little bit of magic. That rocker cover is now off. Now I have turned my mic off and I'm just literally voiceover in this, so I can't remember what I'm saying. But can you just see all that silicone that somebody has put on there? There's just no need for it whatsoever, and it's going to take a lot of cleaning for me to get that up to the standards that I like. Right, shall we go ahead now and get this vehicle back in the air and get the sump off? I've gone ahead and I've removed the sump. And of course, it is absolutely saturated in silicone. Now, if I just, even the flywheel is covered in silicone. That's it. Even the flywheel's covered in silicone. But I've just put my marks on there because I have got the crank locking pin around the back there, and that is locked in to the crankshaft. We're just going to put the holding tool on the flywheel there. I'm just nipping it up, but I can't get over how this car isn't running, because you know that, how should I say, how this car is running with no engine management faults. Now that pin there is to go in there and time that crankshaft pulley up. If I can hold it up, I'll show you. Guys, can you see it? Can you see in there? It's like half a hole out. It won't even go in. So I don't even know how it's running without any energy management. Now, this has been previously done. I can see the belt has been changed. But they've used the old crank bolts as well. Well, I've gone ahead, removed the timing cover. 100% the belt has been changed before because it has got an INA belt on it. Now, remember when I couldn't get that timing pin in the crank pulley? Just take that belt off. I now know, and it all makes sense, because when I've taken the crank pulley off, there is no friction washer on the pulley, and that is why you must put that friction washer on, because it stops that pulley from turning. Oh well. I tell you what, I've probably spent the last hour and a half cleaning all the silicone off that cylinder head, and it's now looking brand new. We've cleaned it all off down the side here, and again, it all looks brand spanking new. Now we've put the belt on, the brand new one. I thought I'd bring you along for the pin pull, because we all like a pin pull, don't we? And that is that belt, nice and tensioned. Now I will get that and add it to my collection. I've gone ahead, cleaned the timing cover. Now I've done all these videos before and I don't want to keep repeating myself. This rubber O-ring here hasn't been changed. As you can see, it's flat and it's hard. Everything was full of silicone, even the water pump. So I'm going to get this water pump off, clean all that silicone off, put the new pump on, new BGA sealant on, which I'll show you how I apply it in a second. Regarding the sealant, what I use is a BGA silicone sealing compound. Now this is absolutely insane stuff. It is probably the best stuff I have ever used. Now how I like to apply it, at the top of the tip, I put a V in it, so you get an even application. If I can just go down and show you. Put a nice beading of it all the way through. And the idea of any sealant is once you've applied it to the surface, leave it for about 3 to 5 minutes, depending on the atmospheric temperature If it's cold, you're going to want to leave it longer, and if it's hot, you're going to leave it shorter. And let it get a little bit of a skin on it so you can touch it and it's not sticking to your fingers. And that means that chemical reaction is already being activated. So when you stick it on, it's going to be curing very quick. Now, I'm not going to bore you putting all this lot back together. I'm going to do the same again with the sealant on the sump. I've fast forwarded a little bit. We've got the timing cover back on, we've got the sump back on, everything's torqued up to speccaroonie. Now remember them 2 bolts that were missing out the bottom of the gearbox? Now I have found one in my toolbox that's done the job, but I'm still going to wait for the other one to turn up from Ford next week because I needed to get the exhaust on to get everything else on. But remember them 2 little bolts that were missing out the timing cover? I have put some 10mm in there. We're going to make sure that everything is pretty much done as it should be. Even though they're not the correct bolts, the bolts will do the job perfectly. Right, I have got quite a little bit to put back on. As you can see, we've got all this. All this has got to go back on. We'll get it running before we go home. Well, I've got to get it running before I go home because I am off tomorrow. There we go. We've done all the magic we can today, and that engine is all back together now. I have left the coil packs unplugged, and we're going to wind it over, let the oil pressure build up, connect them up, and then we're going to go for the first start. Now I have put all the nuts and bolts in that were missing, apart from that one on the bell housing and that one underneath that throttle body there, which is coming on Monday. I'll probably put it in my community for you all to see. But yeah, I'm going to wind it over now, get the oil pressure up, and then we'll go for the first start. There you go, that vehicle is now spun over. I've spun it over for about 20-30 seconds, and everything sounds perfect. Now I tell you what I have had an awful lot of is people messaging me saying that they've carried out these wet belt replacements and it's spinning over for 3 seconds and then cutting straight out. And I'm going to tell you now exactly what that fault is. It is either a broken wire going to the crankshaft sensor or the actual crankshaft sensor plug itself where it's not clipped in properly. But however, that is all back together. Make sure we've got no fuel leaks. Give it a good snifferoonie. Let's get on the key now and give it a start. I've got 2 choices on me. It either doesn't start, or we start and it runs like a little singer. Let's tick it over. And it's running and sounding like a little singer. How's that for a Friday? Not bad considering, is it? I'm not going to let this vehicle get too hot, Ben.
You got the job.
I don't know, it's there, I think, yeah. But anyway, I'm not going to let it run for too long, obviously, because we want the sealant to go off overnight. Now, I'm not here in the morning, so this car's going to sit on my ramp all over weekend and let everything settle. Now, we have got no warning lights at all. Oh, let's get in. You know what, let's switch it off. Bing bong. But yeah, that is one little wet belt on a Ford Focus carried out. Now, whoever had done it previously had done a very, very shoddy job. You've all seen what they've done. We're now at 20 to 5. I've got all my tools to put away. I'm going to get this downloaded off my camera to my phone, chuck it through a little bit of an edit, and hopefully, fingers crossed, if all goes to plan, you lot will be seeing it at about 7:30, 8 o'clock tonight. But yeah, I think if you've enjoyed the video, please hit that like and subscribe, and no doubt we are going to see you on the next video. Anyway, have a mint weekend, and let's get it sent.